Applause echoed across the stadium. Emily Williams sat motionless in her wheelchair, eyes stinging with unshed tears. Her father, CEO Richard Williams, was busy in the VIP section, phone pressed to his ear. No one stood beside Emily as her name was called. Then, a weathered hand rested gently on her shoulder. The hand of a man in a school security uniform, someone she'd never spoken to. "You deserve to have someone standing with you," he whispered. Jack Miller woke at 4:30 a.m., just as he had every day for the past 5 years. The small one-bedroom apartment filled with the sound of an old radio announcing the weather. A beautiful sunny day for Westlake High School's graduation ceremony. He smiled, reaching out to touch the photograph of his daughter Sarah, 16, holding her citywide math competition trophy. "2 more years and it'll be your turn, princess," he whispered, then poured himself a cup of bitter coffee. His security uniform hung neatly on a hanger, pressed the night before. Jack looked at it with quiet pride. Not the military uniform of his past, but still a symbol of responsibility, of protecting others. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against the worn Special Forces badge. An unconscious habit whenever he needed to steady himself. 6 years had passed since his closest teammates had sacrificed themselves in Afghanistan. 6 years of nightmares, of asking why not me, of guilt for failing to protect them. But today, Jack wouldn't let those memories affect him. Today was special for the kids he'd silently watched over and protected for 4 years. The kids he secretly called his little army. 15 miles away, in a hillside mansion overlooking the city, Richard Williams had been awake for hours. Or more accurately, he'd never gone to sleep. A video conference with Asian partners had stretched until 3 a.m., and now he was reviewing a presentation for the board meeting that afternoon. The same day as his daughter's graduation. "Richard, do you remember what day it is?" His wife Catherine's voice came from the doorway of his home office. Without looking up from his laptop screen, he answered, "Friday. East Tech contract deadline. And Emily's graduation ceremony. Don't worry, I'll be there. Like you've been there for so many of her events before." Catherine sighed. Emily needs her father, Richard. Especially after the accident. Richard closed his eyes. The accident. 2 years ago, his driver's car had crashed on the highway. Emily was in the back seat, not wearing her seatbelt. She had been rushing to a piano recital after waiting 40 minutes for her father. Richard had promised to attend, but got caught in a meeting. In the end, he'd called his driver to pick up his daughter, and the accident happened. Emily survived, but her legs were paralyzed. And along with her legs, Richard's heart seemed to have gone numb too. He buried himself in work even more, as if it were the only way to avoid facing his guilt. He had spent millions on surgeries, cutting-edge medical equipment, and top rehabilitation specialists. But what Emily truly needed, her father's presence, was the one thing he couldn't give her. "I will be there," Richard said, his voice dropping. "For the entire ceremony. I've rescheduled the meeting." Catherine said nothing more. Richard's promises had lost their value long ago. At Westlake High, Jack Miller was checking security around the stadium area. Rows of chairs were being arranged, the stage decorated with flags and banners. He went through the safety checklist. Emergency exits, fire protection system, wheelchair areas for disabled students and parents. Jack paused at the last item. He remembered the brown-haired student in a wheelchair he often saw in the library. Always alone, always focused on her books or assignments. Once, he had helped her with a heavy stack of books and received a shy smile in return. Emily Williams. The daughter of Richard Williams, the man the press called the Tech King, who owned the city's largest software company, and was the school's main scholarship fund sponsor. Jack touched the badge in his pocket. A brave girl, he thought. Lost her legs but never gave up. Still excelled academically, still pushed herself every day. Sometimes he saw her practicing with parallel bars in the gym, sweat dripping, teeth biting her lip, but never quitting. Unlike her father, Richard Williams rarely appeared at school. He sent assistants to parent-teacher meetings, sent drivers to pick up his daughter every day. Once, Jack had seen Emily waiting in the rain for nearly an hour, everyone else gone, before the gleaming black Bentley appeared, not with her father, but with a well-dressed but unfamiliar man. Suddenly Jack's phone vibrated. A message from his daughter. "Dad, have a great day. I dreamed about Mom last night. She's so proud of you." Jack smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. Lisa, his wife, had died of cancer 4 years ago when Sarah was just 12. Since then, father and daughter had become each other's rock. Jack looked down at the badge in his hand. "Today will be a good day," he whispered, like a promise to himself, and to those he loved, whether they were still by his side or gone. The graduation ceremony began at 3 p.m. June sunlight blazed brilliantly, a gentle breeze rustling through colorful flags. Students in graduation gowns lined up neatly, radiant smiles, fresh boutonnieres. Parents gathered in the stands, cameras and phones ready to capture the memorable moment. Jack stood near the main gate, observing the crowd. He immediately recognized Emily Williams. She sat in the front row of the student section, her wheelchair decorated with small blue ribbons, the school color. She looked lonely amid the sea of excited people. Jack scanned the VIP area where sponsors and school officials sat. Richard Williams was there, in an expensive suit, talking on the phone, his expression tense. Catherine sat beside him, her eyes never leaving her daughter. The ceremony proceeded as usual. The principal spoke, the valedictorian delivered a speech, the school band performed. Then came the diploma presentation. Each student was called by name, walked onto the stage, received their diploma from the principal, posed for a photo, and returned to their seat. Emily Williams. Her name echoed through the speakers. Jack watched as Emily guided her wheelchair toward the stage. No one accompanied her, unlike other students who usually had friends or family standing by their side. He looked toward the VIP section. Richard Williams was still on his phone, seemingly unaware that his daughter's name had just been called. Emily stopped her wheelchair in front of the steps leading to the stage. Confusion was evident on her face. There was no wheelchair access. Jack didn't think twice. He quickly moved toward Emily, instinctively touching the badge in his pocket. "May I help you?" he said quietly. Emily looked up, her eyes surprised yet grateful. She nodded. Jack positioned himself behind the wheelchair, carefully pushing her up via a side access path next to the stage. He pushed Emily to the principal, stood quietly beside her as she received her diploma, then continued to wheel her to the photo position. "Where's your father?" Jack asked softly, without thinking. "Busy," Emily replied, her voice bitter. As usual, Jack looked toward the VIP section one more time. Richard had stopped talking on the phone, and was watching them with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met for a second, and Jack felt an indescribable tension. "Would you take a picture with me, Mr. Miller?" Emily unexpectedly asked. "So I have someone standing next to me in my graduation photo." Jack was surprised. "You know my name?" Emily smiled slightly. "I know everyone who truly cares about the students at this school." The photographer signaled them to pose. Jack placed his hand on Emily's shoulder, a natural smile appearing on his lips. The flash went off. As they left the stage, Richard Williams was waiting at the end of the path, his face no longer bearing traces of his usual indifference. Instead, there was barely contained anger. "Who are you to touch my daughter?" Richard asked, his voice low but threatening. "And take pictures with her?" Jack stood straight, not backing down. "Jack Miller. School security. I just helped Emily onto the stage, because no one else was doing it." "Dad." Emily spoke up. "Mr. Miller helped me. You should be thanking him." "Quiet, Emily," Richard said, without taking his eyes off Jack. "We don't need a stranger interfering in our family affairs. Especially one wearing a security uniform." Jack felt anger rising but controlled it. "I only did what a father should do," he said, each word clear. "Stand by their child in important moments." Pause. Richard's face hardened. "Are you teaching me how to be a father? What do you know about me? About my family?" "I know enough," Jack replied calmly. "I've seen Emily waiting in the rain. I've seen her looking toward the school gate whenever there's a parent event. I've seen her struggle every day, alone." "Dad." Emily tugged gently at Richard's sleeve. "Don't do this. Not now." Other students and parents were beginning to notice the confrontation. Catherine quickly approached, placing a hand on her husband's shoulder. "Richard, I think we should." "No, Catherine," Richard cut her off. "He needs to know his place." He turned to Jack. "I could have you fired with one phone call. Never approach my daughter again." Jack didn't flinch. "You threaten me with power and money. But you can't buy what Emily really needs." "What's that?" Richard asked, his voice challenging. "A father who's truly present," Jack answered, then turned to Emily. "Congratulations on your graduation. You did great." He smiled at her, then walked away, leaving Richard standing there, anger and confusion evident on his face. Emily watched Jack's figure disappear into the crowd, then turned to look at her father. She had never seen him like this, losing control, showing emotion so openly. "Dad," she said softly, "I want to go home." 2 days after the graduation, Jack Miller arrived at school earlier than usual. Summer vacation had begun, but there was still much work to be done. Inventorying security equipment, repairing broken locks, preparing for the upcoming summer session. He was checking security cameras in the library area when he heard a car engine outside. Looking through the window, he saw a gleaming black Bentley stop in front of the school gate. Emily Williams was helped down with her wheelchair. She said something to the driver, and the car drove away, leaving her alone. Jack watched as Emily maneuvered her wheelchair into the school grounds, heading toward the library. What brought her back here after graduation, he wondered, but didn't rush to approach her. After the confrontation with Richard Williams, he didn't want to cause more trouble for Emily. But Emily seemed to be looking for someone. She stopped in the middle of the courtyard, looking around, then spotted Jack standing by the library window. She waved, and Jack couldn't do anything but step outside. "Hello, Emily," he said as he approached. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to talk to you," Emily replied, her voice more confident than Jack expected. "About what happened at graduation. And to thank you." Jack nodded, not knowing what to say. He led Emily to a stone bench under the shade of a large maple tree in the schoolyard. "Mr. Miller," Emily began, "I'm sorry about how my father behaved. He's not always like that." Jack looked into Emily's eyes, seeing the sincerity and sadness in them. "It's okay, Emily. I understand." "No," Emily shook her head. "You don't understand. Nobody does." She paused, taking a deep breath. "My father wasn't always like this. Before the accident, he was different." Jack listened as Emily told him about her father. About weekend camping trips when she was little. About how Richard had taught her to ride a bike, about the evenings he read stories to her. About a man who used to laugh more, who used to prioritize family above all else. "Then the company grew," Emily said. "My father became more successful, busier. And the accident changed everything." She looked down at her immobile legs. "I think he can't forgive himself." "For the accident?" Jack asked gently. Emily nodded. "He was supposed to take me to my piano recital. But he was busy in a meeting, so he called his driver. I was angry, didn't fasten my seatbelt. And then..." She didn't finish the sentence. Jack touched the badge in his pocket. He understood that guilt. The unforgivable remorse of failing to protect someone you love. "I served in the military," he said, surprising himself by sharing this. "Special Forces. 6 years ago, during a mission in Afghanistan, I lost my 2 closest teammates. They sacrificed themselves to save me." Jack took out the badge and showed it to Emily. It was old, worn from being touched too many times. "John and Mike," he said, his voice growing hoarse. "I keep this badge to remember them. And to remind myself to live worthy of their sacrifice." Emily looked at the badge with respect. "How did you overcome that pain?" Jack was silent for a moment. "I don't think I've completely overcome it. But I've learned to live with it. By focusing on those who still need me. My daughter, Sarah. And the kids at this school." He smiled. "Including you, Emily." Emily returned the badge to Jack. As he put it back in his pocket, she said, "I think my father needs something like that. Something to remind him of what truly matters." Suddenly, a car horn sounded from the school gate. The Bentley had returned. "I have to go now," Emily said, then handed Jack an envelope. "This is our graduation photo. I asked for an extra copy." Jack accepted the envelope, touched. "Thank you, Emily." As Emily turned her wheelchair to leave, she stopped and looked back. "Mr. Miller. My father is hosting a charity event tomorrow night. At our house. Fundraising for the Veterans Rehabilitation Center." She hesitated. "I think you should come." Jack was surprised. "Are you sure your father would agree?" Emily smiled for the first time. It was his idea. He wants to apologize. In his own way. After Emily left, Jack opened the envelope. Inside was the photo of them on stage, Jack standing beside Emily's wheelchair, his hand on her shoulder, both smiling. On the back of the photo, Emily had written, "Thank you for standing with me when I needed it most." The following evening, Jack stood in front of the imposing iron gates of the Williams estate. He wore his only suit, slightly out of fashion but well maintained. Sarah had insisted on ironing it perfectly. "You look handsome, Dad," she had said, adjusting his tie. "That CEO will regret messing with you." Jack had smiled at his daughter's protective instinct. "I'm not going there to fight, Sarah. I'm going to build bridges, not walls." Now, showing his invitation to the security guard, Jack felt strangely nervous. The expansive grounds were beautifully landscaped, with fairy lights strung through the trees. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Men in expensive suits and women in designer dresses mingled on the terrace, champagne glasses in hand. This was a world Jack had never been part of. Inside the mansion, Jack felt even more out of place. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, priceless artwork. He accepted a glass of water from a passing waiter, declining the champagne. His eyes scanned the room, eventually finding Emily in her wheelchair, surrounded by a small group of adults. She spotted him, and her face lit up. She excused herself, and wheeled over to him. "Mr. Miller. You came," she said, genuine happiness in her voice. "I wasn't sure you would." "I gave my word," Jack replied simply. Emily nodded, understanding the weight behind those 4 words. "Come with me," she said. "There's someone who wants to speak with you." She led Jack through the crowd toward a quiet corner of the vast living room. Richard Williams stood there, looking out of a floor-to-ceiling window. Unlike at the graduation, he seemed smaller somehow, less imposing. When he turned and saw them approaching, Jack noticed the dark circles under his eyes. "Mr. Miller," Richard said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." Jack shook his hand, feeling the tension between them. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Williams." Richard gestured to a pair of chairs. "Please, sit down. Emily, would you give us a moment?" Emily looked between the 2 men, then nodded. "Don't fight," she said, half joking, before wheeling away to join her mother. "I owe you an apology," Richard said once they were alone, surprising Jack with his directness. "My behavior at the graduation was inexcusable." Jack remained silent, allowing the man to continue. "Emily told me about your military service. About your teammates." Richard looked down at his hands. "And about how you keep that badge. It helps me remember what matters," Jack said quietly. Richard nodded. "I used to know what mattered. Before all this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent room. "Success can be its own kind of prison, Mr. Miller." "Jack." Jack corrected him. "Please call me Jack." "Jack," Richard repeated, as if testing the name. "And I'm Richard." A silence fell between them, not entirely uncomfortable. "The accident," Richard finally said, his voice barely audible. "I've tried to fix it with money. The best doctors, the best therapists, the best equipment. But I couldn't fix what Emily needed most." "Which is?" Jack asked, though he knew the answer. "Me," Richard said simply. "My presence. My time. The things I kept giving to the company instead of my daughter." He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "How do you do it, Jack? How do you be there for your daughter while carrying your own grief?" Jack thought about it. "One day at a time," he finally said. "Some days are harder than others. But Sarah gives me purpose. A reason to get up every morning." "Emily used to play piano," Richard said, seemingly changing the subject. "Before the accident, she was talented. Had dreams of Juilliard." His voice cracked slightly. "I missed her last recital. I was in a meeting about a merger that would increase our stock value by 2 points. Is that why you're hosting this fundraiser?" Jack asked. "For the Veteran Center." Richard nodded. "Partly. But also because Emily suggested it. She said it might help me find redemption, I suppose." At that moment, the sound system crackled to life. A spotlight illuminated a grand piano on a small stage that had been set up at one end of the room. Catherine stood at a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your generous donations tonight. We have a special performance for you. For the first time in 2 years, our daughter, Emily Williams, will play for us." A murmur went through the crowd as Emily wheeled onto the stage, positioned herself at the piano. Richard stood up abruptly, his face a mixture of shock and emotion. "She hasn't touched a piano since," he whispered. Emily adjusted her position, took a deep breath, then placed her hands on the keys. The room fell silent. Then, music filled the air. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, played with such feeling that it brought tears to many eyes. Jack looked at Richard, and saw the man transfixed, watching his daughter with a combination of pride, love, and regret. When Emily finished, the room erupted in applause. Richard was the first on his feet, clapping harder than anyone. As Emily wheeled off the stage, Richard rushed to meet her. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Richard knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his daughter, and wrapped his arms around her. "I'm so proud of you," he said, loud enough for Jack to hear. "I'm so sorry for everything, Emily." Emily returned the embrace, her own tears flowing freely now. "I know, Dad. I know." Later that night, as the event was winding down, Jack prepared to leave. He had said his goodbyes to Emily and Catherine, but couldn't find Richard. As he walked toward the front door, Richard appeared from a side room. "Jack, wait," he called. He held a small box in his hands. "I wanted to give you this." Jack accepted the box, opened it curiously. Inside was a sleek, modern watch. Expensive, clearly. Jack started to protest, but Richard held up a hand. "It's not what you think," he said. "Look at the back." Jack turned the watch over. Engraved on the back were the words, "Time is the most valuable thing a man can spend." He looked up at Richard, questioning. "It's a reminder," Richard explained. "For me. I've bought a matching one for myself." He pulled up his sleeve to show an identical watch. "So neither of us forgets what's truly important." Jack understood then. Like his badge, the watch was a tangible reminder of an intangible truth. "Thank you," he said sincerely, putting the watch on. Richard nodded. "There's something else," he said, suddenly seeming nervous. "The Veterans Center needs a new security director. Someone with military experience who understands what those men and women are going through. The pay is substantially better than a school security position." Jack stared at him, speechless. "Are you offering me a job?" Richard smiled slightly. "Emily suggested it, actually. She said you've been protecting other people's children for years. Maybe it's time you protected those who once protected us." He extended his hand. "Think about it?" Jack shook the offered hand, his mind racing with possibilities. "I will." As summer stretched into fall, change came to many lives. Jack Miller accepted the position at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, where his military experience and compassionate approach made him immediately respected. The higher salary allowed him to move Sarah to a better apartment, closer to her school. Richard Williams stepped down as CEO of his company, taking the position of chairman instead. The announcement shocked the business world, but not his family. "I'm reclaiming my time," he told reporters. "Some investments are more important than others." Emily began her freshman year at the local university, choosing to stay close to home rather than go to an Ivy League school that had accepted her. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she told her concerned parents. And on weekends, a curious sight could be seen at the Veterans Center. Emily Williams volunteering, playing piano for the veterans, her father often by her side, listening with pride. One crisp October afternoon, Jack found Richard sitting alone in the center's garden, looking at his watch. "Timekeeping?" Jack asked, sitting beside him. Richard smiled. "Emily's picking me up. We're going to Sarah's math competition." Over the months, the two families had grown close, with Sarah and Emily forming a particular bond, despite their age difference. "She's excited you're both coming," Jack said. Richard nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I found something the other day, going through old boxes." He handed Jack a faded photograph. It showed a much younger Richard, in a military uniform. Jack looked up in surprise. "National Guard," Richard explained. "Just for 2 years, during college. Nothing like your service, but I understand more than you might think." Jack studied the photo, then returned it, a new understanding passing between them. "We all have our battles," he said quietly. Richard nodded. "And our chances for redemption." Just then, Emily's van pulled up at the garden entrance. As both men stood to meet her, Jack noticed Richard instinctively touch his watch, a gesture remarkably similar to Jack's own habit with his badge. "Some wounds never fully heal, but they can transform us. Some bridges, once thought burned forever, can be rebuilt stronger than before. And sometimes, the most meaningful connections come from the most unexpected moments, like when a weathered hand rests gently on a wheelchair at a graduation ceremony, and whispers, 'You deserve to have someone standing with you.'"